Welcome to Equity Capital Conversations. This is your host, Benjamin Sklar, and today's guest is Seth Farbman, the co-founder and chairman of VStock Transfer. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm honored to have you on the show. We've met many times at various conferences in the industry, and everyone tells me you're a true legend in the industry, in the space of.
Maybe in my own mind, that's about it. But thank you for the kind words. Always nice to see you at those events as well.
I was shocked when you told me that you are a securities lawyer as well. So take us back to the beginning of how you got into this
Yeah,
space.
don't definitely don't hold that against me. Yeah, started out as a securities attorney. I was in retrospect, it was pretty crazy because I was only 2 or 3 years out of school when I decided to launch my own practice. And I just found that I was bringing in some business at the time. I was in a small firm in the city, and they had encouraged sort of do your own thing, find your own clients. And then as I did that, it just opened up other possibilities. So, the story with I guess the first venture is Vintage Filings, and my partner Shai Stern and I started that in 2002. Sounds like a really long time ago now. And classic story, slept on my couch, ate pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we started an SEC Edgar filing firm because as a securities attorney, I was writing the 10K and the registration statement, which even before your time was referred to an SB2 as opposed to an S1. And then just started to say, hey, why don't I Edgarize the documents for you since I'm writing it anyway. And most of the clients were pretty receptive. So that's sort of how I got into the corporate services securities kind of racket.
Were you able to wear both hats and be a lawyer and Edgar printer at the same time?
Yeah, it actually streamlined things at the time because if I was writing the 10K, I would be able to anticipate, the format. It's funny, I have one attorney that at the time he was with a huge law firm. Now we're good friends, and he runs a very successful practice. And in retrospect, he told me that I would always annoy him because to save time, I would sometimes write the documents in the Edgar format and then send it to him for review. And he's like, why am I reading a document that's in Edgar format? But yeah, it's two totally different services, and it was pretty well received at the time.
And so you sold the business.
Yeah, so very quickly I stopped practicing law and then really focused my attention full time on vintage filings. We hesitated every step of the way. I didn't want to bring on companies that were too big because God forbid we made a mistake, or I didn't want to hire any employees because, that responsibility of somebody else's livelihood on my shoulders was terrifying. But ultimately, we hired our first and the second, and we grew to about 100 plus employees. And then in 2007, we had the opportunity to sell the company, and we sold it to PR Newswire, which was then a division of UBM out of London. And they just felt that the synergy was there. They had public companies doing press releases. We had public companies doing Edgar filings. And so we took that exit opportunity.
What was the best part of having your big payday?
Um, that's a loaded question. On the one hand, of course, it was amazing. I was pretty young at the time, and at the same token, you kind of feel like this was my baby, and I was sending it off to college, so to say, putting it in other people's hands. But just the feeling of taking something from concept to exit was really fulfilling, and just gave me a drive to say, okay, was that a fluke? Should we try it again? But it was a great experience from start to finish.
So take us to how you got to VStock Transfer.
So a couple steps in between, but we then tried, let's just say we tried a couple of other non-corporate services compliant ventures, everything from the apparel industry to the weight loss industry, and a lot of those failed miserably. So, I can stress this to your audience, like not everything goes to gold and not everything is a home run. Anybody who has any good stories to tell, I'm sure has a couple of stories that did not succeed, and they've got a couple of learning points from that. But after some of those, we then stuck to the corporate services. We ended up launching a company called V Corp Services, which did incorporations, LLC formations. You as a well-rounded securities attorney know that there are a couple of vendors out there that deal with that. And so nothing that I've done is like unique or sexy or needs a patent. It's just plain vanilla. Just do good service, offer good price. And so we launched that and we grew that to 10,000 plus companies. And then a couple of years later, had an exit. We sold the company to Walters Clore, which is a large international conglomerate, and at the same time launched a background and due diligence company called VCheck Global, which was a great opportunity for us to expand to other verticals. So it wasn't just IPOs, it was also REITs and it was also real estate and anybody who needed a background check, and scaled that to about 100 plus employees and sold that to a private equity firm a few years ago. But all along, I had VStock, which we launched in 2011. And so the short version is that we work with about 900 publicly traded companies. Our focus is really primary IPOs, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, now SIBO, and OTC. And so it's staying within that public company realm and seeing how we can add value wherever we can.
Tell us, what is a stock transfer agent?
Great question. So essentially, I talked about boring and compliance. That's what we do. I mean, we manage the cap table, right? So if you are a company that is contemplating going public, so at the end of the day, you need a third party to handle all of those shareholder records, and then you're subject to a whole bunch of SEC requirements and things like that. So I always say people will engage a transfer agent, a stock transfer agent, usually at two occasions. One is they're about to go public, and so they want a transfer agent to handle it. Or if you're a private company, you're raising capital, you want to show your investors that you're acting as if. So they don't want to put money in and know that you're printing stock certs out of your basement. That's a little shady. So if you come to them and say, hey, listen, we've got a registered transfer agent, they're obligated to report to the SEC. It gives the investors that warm and fuzzy feeling that everything is being done the right way. And so that's what we as a transfer agent do.
And with the advancement of technology, how has your company changed over time?
Probably not as much as you'd think, meaning we, at a certain period of time, focused heavily on tokens and, blockchain. But at the end of the day, what I personally find is that the technology is not as needed as the personal touch and just being responsive, because at the end of the day, the transferring from our back office to your brokerage account, for example, is pretty standardized through the DTC system. What really matters is when that shareholder calls up and says, hey, my spouse passed away, I need to break up my shares. Or somebody says, I want to gift my shares to my 5 grandkids. They want to speak to somebody on the phone. They want to know that their account is being handled, not just push a button and hope that it gets taken care of.
Right. What are some trends or developments you've seen in the industry over the last few years?
Um, I would say a lot of the trends are probably the ones that you see on the securities side. Just I wouldn't say that they're fads, right? But different ways for companies to go public. They focused on the SPAC for a couple of years, which is now a 4-letter word, if I could say that. And then you've got the Reg A, which was extremely busy. It still is, but Reg A, as you know, is basically when companies raise small amounts of money from a lot of different people, and usually it's mom and pops. So we've got some clients that have 15, I think the highest is about 22,000 individual shareholders. So you can imagine, like when they put out news, our phones are blowing up with questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? So you've got the Reg A route to go public or raise money. And then you've got recently, over the last couple of years, a direct listing where the companies don't necessarily need the funding from the investment banker, but they want to get public. So they'll just do it themselves through, counsel. There's always something coming around the corner. We try to look out for what that might be.
Right. What are the biggest challenges that you're currently facing as a business owner?
Challenges. You have time for another podcast? Every day is filled with challenges. Certainly some bigger than others. I think finding talent is something that we spend a lot of time on. Trying to find people that care about what they do and care about the shareholders, because as I mentioned, I think that, outside the scope of the scenarios that I gave you beforehand, at the end of the day, we have to remember that we're dealing with real capital. I mean, these are real companies, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, publicly traded. And so when somebody's calling up, they have a lot of money at stake very often. And so we just want to have people that care, that they can execute. Um, and I think challenges in general are just keeping up with different rules, regulation, making sure that everything is being handled accordingly. Because the way I look at it is we have two clients for every client. The first is the company, and we want to make sure that they're protected and doing everything according to rules and regulations. But at the same time, we do have the individual shareholders, so we have to view them as a client as well. So our team has to just really take all that into account, and finding talent is, I think, something we spend a lot of time on.
Rather than talking about challenges, let's talk about opportunities. What do you see as the greatest opportunity for growth and innovation in the stock transfer industry?
I think that that the same growth and opportunity, if we're gonna, be specific about the stock transfer industry, is about the IPO market in general. And that is that so many of these companies go public or want to go public for a variety of different reasons, right? It might be because of the valuation, it might be because they want to use their stock as currency, but at the end of the day, they want to go public so that they have this platform, this worldwide platform to tell their story. And I think that that is really the opportunity in today's day that companies maybe 5, 8 years ago didn't necessarily have, is the opportunity to really do storytelling, get the message out, connect to great people like we did over LinkedIn. And it's a different time of being able to take advantage of the public markets in a good way, more so than I think several years ago.
Right. Talk to us about your business model.
So the business model is pretty straightforward. Make as much money as you can, please as many people as you can, and hope that it continues for as long as it can. The business model is pretty straightforward because I think that one of the pros and cons of being in this industry in particular is that at the end of the day, you do have a finite market to go after, right? So there are times that I'm a little bit envious of people that sell a product, right? If you're selling a pen or you're selling an iPhone case, or your audience is massive, tens of millions, hundreds of. Here, my audience is pretty limited. It's for the most part any company that is IPOing or that is already publicly traded. So I've got a certain target audience. So really, our goal every day is to get our information in front of that audience, as well as I don't like to say that they're service providers, but the team of professionals around the public company journey. So firms like yourself, the auditors, the investment bankers, really anybody that is a key service provider in the public company realm is who we spend our days trying and nights trying to meet.
Hmm. It seems like you've done an incredible job of becoming friendly with the major players in this space. What is the secret sauce? How did you go about becoming so popular?
Well, first of all, you have to make sure that popularity doesn't pay the bills, right? So you just want to make sure that you're providing good service and value as well. I don't know if I'm so popular. I don't know if I'm so friendly, but I I do think that I try as best I can to provide value. And I think that's something that you and I spoke about maybe even a year plus ago is, whether you're a transfer agent, you're a securities lawyer, you're a banker, or a CEO, if you can be obsessed with providing value for everyone else around you, as opposed to taking, like, give me, give me, give me, or spending your time just, shouting from the rooftops, I'm so great, I'm so inexpensive, I'll do this, I'll do that. Nobody wants to hear about, I'll do this, I'll do that. They want to hear about, in my mind, what can you do for me? And so I historically have just tried as best I can to provide value to everybody that I meet, primarily through LinkedIn, whether that's introducing people, providing an article that I think would be helpful. I always try to make it so that if I have a meeting, I am the first one to reply later in the afternoon, or I should say late at night, because I want to make sure that that person is getting something beneficial from the meeting that we had. So even if it's not, earth shattering, right? I'll meet a CEO who's from Dallas, and then I'll remember that, oh yeah, you know what, in a month or so, there's this huge conference taking event, not too far from him. I'll just send him a link to that conference saying, hey, I thought this might be helpful to you. Or, somebody I met the other day that's very active in the sports arena, but they wanted to transition over to the music industry, to concerts. I'll introduce him to somebody there. So really, at the end of the day, I'm not so friendly, but I spend my day being a matchmaker and trying to introduce people as often as I can, with the hope that that will eventually have karma and come back to me, whether it's through LinkedIn, through email introductions, whether it's through conferences, and it could end up being a win-win situation for both parties involved.
If the CEO of a company were listening to this right now and you had the opportunity to share your words of wisdom with him or her, what would you tell them to help guide them on the process of navigating the IPO?
You have good questions. Wow. Okay. The thought process. Well, firstly, I would tell them what some already know when they go into it, but everyone needs a good reminder of it, is that, from the seat that I sit in, and probably yourself as well, they have to recognize that going through that public company journey is going to mean that when they come out on the other side, they've got two full-time jobs, not just one, right? So they have to spend all their efforts on the business, growing it, and revenue, and employees, and all the fun stuff day to day. But now they've just taken on an entirely new job as well, which they have to be prepared for, right? Speaking to shareholders, raising capital, because it's never enough. You always have to raise more. Communicating with your audience, and balancing that work-life balance, so to say, of like, I'm not really looking at the stock because I'm just going to execute. And if you execute, then hopefully everything will fall into place.
Right. That's good advice. Let's talk about the future. Where do you see our industry going in the next 5, 10 years?
If I had that, then my title would be investment banker, because I'd know what to look for and what not to. Listen, I think things right now are pretty even keeled, right? We went through a period when things were, robust, and we couldn't keep up with the IPO demand, and things calmed down. Now I think that we're doing deals every week, we're seeing deals. The size of the deals are significantly smaller than they were in the past. And I think that, maybe in the first quarter of next year, that's going to change. I'm hoping. The word on the street is that people are excited about where the markets could come back to, from a deal perspective. The money is out there, right? I mean, the bankers that we're speaking to, the family offices, the chief investment officers, there's no lack of capital. It's a question of the companies being able to brand themselves and really convey the story of, hey, you want to invest now, otherwise you're going to miss out on what could be an amazing opportunity. So I think that the size of the deals has to increase, and then that will capture everybody's attention again.
Are there any misconceptions about transfer agents that you'd like to address?
The misconception about the transfer agent per se, there are a bunch of them, but I'll give you one quick story. I've told this over on occasion, but we had a shareholder who decided to join us, And so one of the first things that we do is that we have to ask him for his shareholder list. He gives us an Excel sheet. We upload it with all the data, and then we give them online access to all their shareholder information so that it's always at their fingertips. So there's one gentleman sent us over his Excel sheet of his shareholder list, and I was looking at it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. He's got Elon Musk, Taylor Swift, Steph Curry. I'm like, all right, I can't help myself. It may not be professional, but I'm calling him up, and I'm like, John, how did you meet these people? Tell me everything. How did you meet these people? What pitch did you tell them? How'd you get them to invest? Like, this is fantastic. And then all of a sudden I hear pause on the other side. And he's like, oh, you want my current shareholders? These are the shareholders I'd like to get. Um, so a lot of times the companies don't recognize the value of, having their house in order, so to say, before they come over to us. That stuff has to be accurate for current shareholders. And then there's also, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but very often people ask us to transfer shares electronically, otherwise in the industry known as a DWAC or a DRS. And the misconception is that we push a button and it just zaps into their account and it's good to go. So that's partially true, but the only way that that happens is if their broker initiates it, right? So we can only be the quarterback to throw the shares to them. Somebody else has to initiate to receive it. So there are details like this that very often we need to clarify so that everybody recognizes our role versus the role of everybody else on the team. And I don't mind taking that time and explaining it to them because these CEOs have spent, time and effort in building their business, and they're, extremely knowledgeable in their space. I don't expect them to know the intricacies of securities law, and even auditors and lawyers don't always know the fine details. So there's a lot of times we just need to explain and clarify, what role each party plays when you're a public company.
If you could share a message with all the equity capital markets lawyers in the small cap space, what would you tell us?
That is not for me to say, but I think at the end of the day, from working with, as I say, close to 900 companies, um, I would say that the advice that should be taken is something that those who do it know it already, and that is to be responsive. Whether it's you, a partner, an associate, even a paralegal. So many of these companies are thirsting for good service and for responsiveness because, as we just mentioned, they're juggling a lot, right? And this is an area that they don't necessarily know at the beginning, right? I mean, they all learn pretty quickly once they're public. But so often companies are say, why does it take 3 weeks to get a 144 opinion letter? Or I don't understand why this filing needs to be done by, they just want somebody that's going to explain it to them and that's going to be responsive. And I think that goes a long way as counsel.
Mhm. Talking on a personal front, what do you think has been the most rewarding aspect of your career in the stock transfer industry?
I think that, you know, I was just talking about this with my daughter the other day, and we were focused on the fact that what you do doesn't necessarily have to like change the world, right? So transferring shares from one person to another, I'm not going to go to sleep at night by saying like, oh, I feel so fulfilled because I transferred, 100,000 shares from his trust to his individual account. So it's not focusing on the details. I think it's focusing on the overall journey. Again, recognizing that these people are turning to or may be turning to a transfer agent and saying like, I don't understand this process. I need your help. And so if I or the 40 people sitting outside my office here can, add value to that process, then we're doing our job. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about is giving forward, paying forward, helping people around you be successful. And I think by doing that, it all comes back. We also try to guide them in other ways, which I find fulfilling. It's not just about, like I said, transferring from one person to another. They have questions about the industry. They have questions about references, about referrals, about branding, about marketing, about, what other types of companies like me have gone public and what were some of the things to look out for. So if we can just create some value off the page, then at the end of the day, I guess I find that fulfilling. Might be
Beautiful.
corny, but it's fulfilling.
Not at all. Can you share a memorable experience or lesson that has shaped your approach to leadership?
Um, I don't think it's a lesson, and I certainly don't think I'm a leader, but I will say two things that have stood out in terms of the way I conduct business is the first is just being partners with Shai Stern. He and I started Vintage together, and although we started in my basement, we did end up moving to a small office on 46th and Broadway. For any of you that know the restaurant La Marais, great kosher steakhouse. So that's where we started. First one room, then a second, then a floor, then three floors. And just as a side note, for anybody who has an office on the third, sixth, and seventh floor of a kosher steakhouse, you'll start smelling the lunch right around 11, 12 o'clock. And I kid you not, Benjamin, he and I were both 40 pounds heavier at the time because and I'll lay the blame on him. He would order, spring rolls at 11 and sushi at 12:30, and then clients would come over and we'd have hors d'oeuvres at 4 and then dinner at 6. So that was always exciting. But one time we were always talking back and forth about the growth of the business. So again, his idea. We literally hired a contractor to come in and just cut a hole through our offices. We had offices next to each other. We just cut a hole through it. First off, so that he could throw and I could throw a football back to each other all day long whenever we ask questions, but also just to learn from each other and gain that year of he's an amazing sales rep. Well, he was the CEO at the time as well. So just gaining from those around you that have a skill set that you may not have. So that was number one. And number two, and I may have mentioned this to you in the past, for all your listeners, I suggest reading a book called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. It literally changed my life about you will gain more from business by helping others around you. And that's certainly the way I conduct myself. But a lot of it was based on that story.
That was going to be my next question. I'm talking about sales. What is the secret to bringing in business?
So there are probably a lot of different approaches for a lot of different people, and everybody's got to find their style and what works best for them. I personally am like probably the most antisocial person you'll meet. Certainly the most antisocial guest you'll have on your many podcasts. Um, and for myself, what I found is that even going to a conference, like for example, Shy would go to a conference, he'd be like that, I forget the name of that character, just whirlwind into the room, and like a half hour later comes out with 45 business cards. It's a talent. Um, Myself, I'd be the guy that's standing in the corner pretending to be on his cell phone so that nobody bothers me and I don't have to ask anybody what their name is. Because walking up to a stranger it's something that is not for everybody. And so from a sales perspective, what I found over the last 10 years is that I do it through LinkedIn, all through LinkedIn, marketing, branding, connecting. It's less intimidating to message somebody saying, hey, let's have a call when you know that they've reviewed your last 30 posts. It's less intimidating to ask somebody if they will give you a shot at their IPO when they know that they've liked all your content for the last 2 years. And also it's less intimidating to reach out to somebody and just hit them up for the opportunity when you know you've commented on their last 30 posts. So they know who you are before you even get on the phone. So from a sales perspective, I would say I probably get at least 60% of our new business strictly through LinkedIn. But everybody's got to find their way. For us, it was conferences during, I'd say, from 2003 to 2010. It was all conferences as often as we can, as many as we can, and we hired like celebrities at the time, like Jeff Garland from Curb Your Enthusiasm, just like we had fun with it. And at the end of the day, I guess that's an important message is, as long as you're having fun, I think people will gravitate towards you.
Incredible. All right, so my last question, signature question before we let you go is if there was one thing you could do to improve this world, what would you do and why?
One thing to improve the world and why. I think since this is a business oriented podcast, so I'll keep it focused on that. I would say that the most important thing is to, if you do stuff that makes you happy and that, you surround yourself with good people, I feel like that changes everyone around you. And at the end of the day, I guess at my ripe old age here, I think that what's important for making the world a better place is just less drama, less fighting, less accusations, and just, surround yourself with good people and create that vibe everywhere you go that people want to be better. I'm always looking for people that inspire me. I'm always looking for people that, just you sit back and you're like, wow, that's incredible. And you change the world one person at a time. And I think they say that you can change the world by changing yourself. So that's what I try to remind myself here and there.
I'm into that. Thank you so much, Seth, for hopping on the show today. Incredible to have you. I see you as a true leader of the space, the industry, and it's
I
been great to have
appreciate
you on the
that.
show.
And you keep up the good work, and I'm gonna be keeping an eye on you on LinkedIn because I know you do a great job there as well.
Thank you, Seth.
All right. Take
Good
care.